The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky surface of Kepler 442b as Mina checked her equipment one final time. She knelt beside the mineral scanner, watching the green numbers dance across its small screen. The device hummed softly as it searched deep beneath the ground for precious metals. "Another good reading here," she called out to her team members. "The iron deposits go down at least 50 meters. Day looked up from his own scanner 20 meters away. His face was covered with dust from the morning's work, but he was smiling. "Same here. This whole area is rich with metals. The company will be very happy with our report." Hannah walked over carrying a sample container filled with dark red rocks. "I found something interesting, too. These stones have traces of titanium mixed in. Very rare to find it in this form." The three humans had been working on this remote mining colony for 8 months. Kepler 442b was a quiet world far from the busy trade routes and crowded planets. Most days they saw nothing but red rocks and purple sky. The work was hard but peaceful. Mina stood up and stretched her back. At 24 years old, she was the youngest member of their small research team, but her engineering skills made her valuable. She could fix almost any machine and read mineral data better than people twice her age. "Let's take a break," she sighed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The heat is getting strong." The three friends walked back toward their small research station. It was a simple building made of metal and plastic, designed to protect them from the planet's harsh weather. Inside were their sleeping quarters, a small kitchen, and the communication equipment that kept them connected to Earth. Day poured water from a large container into 3 cups. "Only 2 more weeks until the supply ship arrives," he said. "I am looking forward to fresh food." "And letters from home," Hannah added. She was older than the others, 31 years old. With a family back on Earth, her husband and 2 children sent her messages every month through the supply ships. Mina nodded, but said nothing. She had no family waiting for her. This job on the mining colony was her chance to build a new life. The pay was good, and she enjoyed the challenge of working in such a remote place. The 3 friends sat at their small table, drinking water and eating dried food from packages. Outside, the wind began to blow harder, making a low whistling sound against the building's walls. "Weather system moving in," Day observed, looking at the sky through their window. "Might be a strong storm tonight." Mina was about to respond when a strange sound filled the air. It was deep and rumbling like thunder, but it came from above instead of the clouds. All 3 humans looked up at the ceiling. "What is that?" Hannah whispered. The rumbling grew louder. Through their window, they could see something moving in the purple sky. It was dark and massive, blocking out the sun as it descended toward their planet. "That's not a weather system," Mina said, her voice tight with fear. The object in the sky was clearly artificial. It had a long, curved shape like a giant blade with smaller objects flying around it. As it came closer, they could see lights flashing along its surface and steam pouring from openings in its hull. "Alien ship," Day breathed. "We need to contact Earth immediately." Mina ran to their communication equipment and began pressing buttons rapidly. The radio crackled with static, but no signal went through. "Something is blocking our transmission," she said. "We can't send a message." The alien ship continued to descend. It was enormous, at least 2 kilometers long, with a dark gray surface that seemed to absorb light. Smaller ships detached from the main vessel and spread out across the sky like hunting birds. "We need to hide," Hannah said. "Get to the emergency shelter." Their research station had a small underground room designed to protect them from severe storms. The 3 humans grabbed their most important supplies and rushed toward the hidden entrance behind their sleeping quarters. Before they could reach safety, the ground began to shake violently. Explosions erupted across the landscape as the smaller alien ships began firing energy weapons at the surface. Bright beams of light struck the rocks, turning solid stone into clouds of glowing dust. "Run!" Mina shouted. They burst through the station's main door and ran across the open ground toward a cluster of large rocks that might provide cover. Behind them, their research station exploded in a ball of orange flame as an alien weapon struck it directly. The three humans dove behind the rocks, just as another energy beam scorched the ground where they had been standing moments before. The air filled with the smell of burning metal and melted stone. "Why are they attacking us?" Hannah gasped, pressing herself against the rocky surface. "We're just miners. We haven't done anything to them." Mena peered around the edge of their hiding place. The smaller alien ships were landing now, their sleek forms touching down on the rocky surface with mechanical precision. Hatches opened along their sides, and creatures began emerging. The aliens were tall and reptilian, with dark green scales covering their bodies. They walked upright like humans, but had longer arms and larger heads. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light, and their mouths were filled with sharp teeth. Each alien carried a weapon that looked like a combination of rifle and sword. "Vorthek," Day whispered. "I've heard stories about them. They're conquerors. They take over planets and enslave the populations." More alien ships continued landing. Soon there were dozens of the reptilian creatures spreading across the landscape, moving in organized groups toward any signs of human presence. "We can't fight them," Mena said. "There are too many, and they have advanced weapons." "Maybe we can sneak away," Hannah suggested. "Find somewhere to hide until they leave." But even as she spoke, they could hear the aliens communicating with each other in harsh, clicking voices. The creatures were systematically searching the area, using scanning devices to detect any life forms. A group of 6 Vorthek warriors approached. Their hiding place. Their yellow eyes swept back and forth across the rocky terrain, and their scanning devices beeped steadily as they detected the 3 hidden humans. "They know we're here," Mena whispered. The lead alien, taller than the others, and wearing more elaborate armor, pointed directly at their hiding spot. It spoke in the human language, but with a thick, unpleasant accent. "Come out, small creatures. We know you are behind the rocks. Do not make us come get you." The 3 humans looked at each other. They had no choice. Slowly, they stood up and stepped out from behind their shelter. Raising their hands to show they carried no weapons, the lead alien studied them with cold yellow eyes. 3 humans, young and healthy. You will come with us." "Where are you taking us?" Day asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The alien's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. "You will provide entertainment for the Empire. The great Vorthek people enjoy watching lesser species perform in our arenas." Before any of the humans could respond, the other aliens moved forward and placed metal restraints around their wrists. The devices locked automatically and began glowing with a faint blue light. "Do not try to remove them," the lead alien warned. "They will deliver painful shocks if you attempt escape." As they were marched toward the waiting ships, Mena looked back at the burning remains of their research station. Everything they had worked for was destroyed. Their peaceful life on this remote world was over. The aliens forced them aboard one of the smaller ships. The interior was dark and cramped, with no windows and harsh lighting. They were pushed into a holding area with metal walls and locked inside as the ship lifted off from the planet's surface. Mena felt the artificial gravity system engage. Through the vibrations in the floor, she could tell they were accelerating rapidly, leaving Kepler 442b behind forever. "What's going to happen to us?" Hannah asked quietly. Mena had no answer. She only knew that their lives had changed completely. In the span of an hour, the Vorthek Empire had claimed them as prisoners, and their fate now lay in the hands of creatures who saw humans as nothing more than entertainment. The ship continued its journey into space, carrying 3 frightened humans toward an uncertain and dangerous future. 3 weeks had passed since Mena last saw natural sunlight. The journey through space had been a nightmare of cramped cells, stale air, and the constant fear of what awaited them at their destination. Now she stood in a massive underground chamber, staring up at walls of black stone that rose hundreds of meters into darkness. The Vorthek homeworld was a place of sharp angles and cold metal. Everything was designed to intimidate and remind prisoners of their powerlessness. The arena where Mena now found herself was the worst example of their cruel architecture. She pressed her face against the metal bars of her holding cell. Through the narrow opening, she could see the main arena floor. It was a circular space covered in sand, surrounded by rows of seats that could hold thousands of spectators. Strange alien technology created barriers of energy that kept the fighting contained. How many do you think it holds? Asked Tae, the Korean man who shared her cell. He had been captured from a research station on Europa, Jupiter's moon. His clothes were torn and dirty, and a healing cut ran across his left cheek. Maybe 10,000, Mina replied. Maybe more. The Vorthak like to make sure everyone can watch their games. Tae sat down heavily on the stone bench that served as their only furniture. Games, he said bitterly. They call it games when they make us fight those things. Mina nodded. Over the past week she had watched dozens of prisoners forced into the arena to face the Vorthak's collection of bioengineered creatures. Some were humans like herself. Others were members of different alien species that had been conquered by the Empire. None of them ever came back. The creatures were horrible things, designed specifically to kill in the most entertaining ways possible. Mina had seen six-legged predators called Kreks that moved faster than a human could run. There were flying beasts with razor-sharp wings that could slice through metal. Worst of all were the massive reptilian monsters that the Vorthak called Gorvik. Tell me again about the feeding schedule, Mina said to Tae. He looked at her with confusion. Why do you keep asking about that? Because patterns are important? Everything here follows a pattern. If we understand the patterns, maybe we can find a way to survive. Tae shrugged. The small creatures get fed every day at the same time. The big ones, like the Gorvik, they get fed less often, maybe every 3 or 4 days. Mina walked to the corner of their cell where she had been collecting small pieces of metal. The Vorthak guards were careless, and sometimes debris from the arena construction fell through the bars. She had been gathering every scrap she could find. What are you making? Tae asked. Tools, Mina said simply. I'm an engineer. Engineers solve problems. She held up a thin piece of metal that she had been shaping against the stone wall. One end was sharp and pointed. The other end was wrapped with strips of cloth torn from her prison uniform. That won't help you against the Kreks, Tae said. Those things can bite through steel. It's not for fighting, Mina replied. It's for other things. A loud horn sounded throughout the arena complex. It was the signal that the day's entertainment was about to begin. Mina and Tae moved to their cell window to watch. The arena floor opened through hidden panels, and 3 Kreks emerged into the sandy circle. They were the size of large dogs, but built like predators from humanity's worst nightmares. Their 6 legs moved in perfect coordination, and their mouths were filled with teeth like broken glass. 2 prisoners were pushed into the arena from the opposite side. Mina recognized them as members of a species called the Kelani. They looked somewhat like humans, but had blue skin and larger eyes. The Vorthak had conquered their world 6 months ago. The crowd of Vorthak spectators cheered as the prisoners tried to run from the Kreks, but there was nowhere to go in the circular arena, and the creatures were much faster than their prey. Mina forced herself to watch even though every instinct told her to look away. She studied how the Kreks moved, how they attacked, where their weak points might be. Knowledge was the only weapon she had. The Kelani prisoners lasted less than 5 minutes. Next. Time it could be us, Tae whispered. Yes, Mina agreed. That's why we need to be ready. After the arena was cleaned and prepared for the next event, a single massive shape emerged from the largest tunnel. The Gorvak was 12 feet tall and covered in dark green scales. Its arms ended in claws that could tear through metal, and its teeth were as long as Mina's fingers, but this time, no prisoners were sent to face it. Instead, Vorthak handlers used long poles with electric prods to guide the creature around the arena. They were showing it off to the crowd, demonstrating their power over such a dangerous beast. Mina watched carefully as the handlers worked. She saw how they stayed just out of reach of the Gorvak's claws. She noticed the scars covering the creature's body, evidence of years of abuse and torture. Most importantly, She saw something in the beast's eyes that the Vorthik had missed. Intelligence. The Gorvak was not just a mindless monster. It was aware of its situation, and it was angry. Every time the electric prods touched its skin, hatred flashed in its yellow eyes. But it had learned to obey because the alternative was even worse pain. Look at its neck, Mina said to Tay. What about it? There's something stuck there, some kind of metal barb. It looks infected. Tay squinted through the bars. I can barely see it. How can you tell? The way it moves its head? It's trying to avoid putting pressure on that spot. The wound must be painful. The demonstration ended, and the Gorvak was driven back into its tunnel by the handler's electric prods. The crowd began to disperse, satisfied with the day's violence. That night, Mena lay on the hard stone floor of her cell and stared at the ceiling. She could hear other prisoners crying or praying in languages she didn't understand. Some were humans from Earth's colonies. Others were aliens from worlds she had never heard of. All of them were waiting to die for the entertainment of their captors, but Mina was thinking about patterns. The Vorthak followed routines. They fed their creatures on schedule. They maintained their equipment in predictable ways. They even arranged their arena events according to certain rules. Patterns could be predicted. And if they could be predicted, they could be disrupted. Tay, she whispered. What? How long since the Gorvak was last fed? 3 days, maybe 4. Why? They'll feed it soon. When they do, I need you to create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Start a fight with the guards. Make them focus on you instead of what I'm doing. Tay was quiet for a long moment. That's suicide. They'll kill me. Maybe, but if you don't help me, we're all going to die anyway. The next morning brought the sound of marching feet as guards moved through the prisoner areas. They were selecting fighters for the day's events. Mena heard them stopping at cells, dragging people away to face the arena. When they reached her cell, one of the guards pointed at Tay. You, come. Tay looked at Mena with fear in his eyes. She nodded slightly, reminding him of their plan. As the guards opened the cell door, Tay suddenly lunged forward and grabbed one of their weapons. He didn't know how to use it properly, but his desperate attack surprised them. Shouting erupted in the corridor as more guards rushed to help. In the confusion, Mena slipped her improvised tools into her clothing and pressed herself against the back wall of the cell. When the guards finally subdued Tay and dragged him away, they forgot to check if anyone else was missing, but Mina was still there, waiting for her chance. Later that day, she heard the sounds of feeding time. The Vorthak handlers were moving through the creature pens, delivering food to their collection of monsters. When they reached the Gorvak's tunnel, Mena was ready. She had loosened several bars in her cell window over the past weeks, working patiently with her metal tools. Now she squeezed through the narrow opening and dropped down into the maintenance area below the arena. The tunnels under the arena were dark and filled with the sounds of caged creatures. Mena moved carefully, using her engineer's knowledge to navigate the maze of passages. She had memorized the layout by watching the patterns of guards and handlers. Finally, she reached the Gorvak's pen. The massive creature was feeding on chunks of raw meat, but it stopped when it sensed her presence. Its yellow eyes fixed on her small form, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. Mena approached slowly, holding her improvised tools. She had one chance to do something that had never been tried before, something the Vorthak would never expect. She was going to try to help the beast that was meant to kill her. The next morning came too soon. Mena sat in her cell, listening to the sounds of the arena being prepared for another day of violence. She had spent the night thinking about her brief encounter with the Gorvak. The massive creature had not attacked her when she approached its pen. Instead, it had watched her with those intelligent yellow eyes, as if trying to understand what she wanted. She had not been able to help remove the infected barb from its neck. The sound of approaching guards had forced her to retreat through the maintenance tunnels back to her cell. But something had changed during those few moments. The Gorvak had seen her, and she had seen something in return. Heavy footsteps echoed through the prisoner area. Mina recognized the sound of Vorthak combat boots on stone floors. The guards were coming for someone. They stopped at her cell. Human. Female, the lead guard said in heavily accented English. You come now. Mina's heart began beating faster, but she forced herself to remain calm. Where are you taking me? The guard's reptilian mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Arena Master wants to see you. Very special honor. Two guards entered her cell and placed heavy metal restraints around her wrists and ankles. The devices were connected by a short chain that made walking difficult. They pushed her forward, forcing her to shuffle down the dark corridor. The arena complex was much larger than Mina had realized. They walked through dozens of passages, past holding areas, filled with creatures and prisoners she had never seen before. The smell of fear and death hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Finally, they reached a large chamber with walls covered in trophies from conquered worlds. Weapons, artwork, and preserved body parts from dozens of alien species decorated the room. At the center sat a massive Vorthak wearing elaborate armor decorated with gold and precious stones. Ah, the human engineer, the arena master said. His voice was deeper than the guards, and his scales were darker green with age. I am Turvash. I have heard interesting things about you. Mina said nothing. She had learned that showing fear or defiance only encouraged the Vorthak to be more cruel. Turvash stood up and walked around her slowly, studying her like a scientist examining an insect. My guards tell me you have been exploring areas where prisoners are not allowed. They found evidence of your presence near the creature pens. I was lost, Mina lied. The tunnels are confusing. The arena master laughed, a harsh sound like grinding. Metal, lost, how amusing. Do you know what happens to prisoners who wander where they should not go? They get punished, Mina replied. Usually, yes. But you are different. You are clever. My technicians analyzed the tool marks you left on your cell bars. Very skillful work for someone with no proper equipment. He leaned closer, his yellow eyes reflecting the room's harsh lighting. This gives me an idea for very special entertainment. Turvash returned to his chair and activated a holographic display. Images of the arena appeared in the air, showing the circular fighting area from different angles. Tomorrow is the Festival of Conquest, he explained. Once each year we celebrate the expansion of our great empire. Thousands of citizens gather to watch our most spectacular events. The display changed to show massive crowds filling every seat in the arena. Mina had never seen so many Vorthak in one place. Their reptilian faces all showed the same expression of cruel anticipation. For this special day we perform the final feeding, Turvash continued. Our most prized creature, the great Gorvak, receives a living offering. Usually we choose the strongest prisoner, the one who has survived longest in our games. Mina felt cold fear spreading through her chest. But this year? This year we will demonstrate the complete superiority of the Vorthak race by feeding a weak human female to our greatest beast. The crowd will see that even the cleverest of your species is nothing before our power. The holographic display now showed the Gorvak in its pen. The creature was even larger than Mina remembered, its dark scales scarred from years of battles and torment. The infected barb was still embedded in its neck, causing visible pain when it moved. Your death will carry special meaning, Turvash said. We will show the galaxy that humans are not worthy of respect or fear. You are simply food for superior beings. Two guards stepped forward and grabbed Mina's arms. But Turvash held up one clawed hand. Wait, first I want her to understand the full honor being given to her. He touched a control and the display changed again. Now it showed recordings of previous final feeding ceremonies. Mina watched in horror as prisoners were thrown into the Gorvak's pen while thousands of Vorthak spectators cheered. The great beast killed quickly, but the crowd seemed to enjoy every moment of terror and pain. See how they scream, Turvash said with satisfaction. See how they run and beg. Tomorrow you will provide the same entertainment. Why tell me this now? Mina asked. Why not just throw me in the arena without warning? The arena master's eyes glittered with malice. Because fear makes the show better. Tonight you will sit in your cell and think about what awaits you. You will imagine the pain and terror. By tomorrow, you will be properly prepared to give our audience the performance they expect. The guards dragged Mina back through the maze of corridors to her cell. But instead of her old prison, they took her to a different chamber. This one was larger, with a window that looked directly into the main arena. "Special quarters for our special guest," one guard said mockingly. "You can watch today's games and imagine yourself down there." They locked her inside and left her alone. Mina walked to the window and looked out at the arena floor. Workers were setting up decorations for tomorrow's festival. Banners with Vortex symbols hung from the walls, and special seating areas were being prepared for important officials. In a few hours, the day's regular entertainment would begin. More prisoners would die for the amusement of the crowd. Tomorrow it would be her turn, but as Mina watched the preparations, her engineer's mind was working. She studied the arena's layout, the placement of the energy barriers, the location of the creature tunnels. Most importantly, she observed the patterns of the guards and handlers. The afternoon brought the usual sounds of combat and death from the arena. Mina forced herself to watch as prisoners fought desperately against various creatures. She paid special attention to how the Vorthak controlled their beasts, using electric prods and sonic devices to direct their movements. When the Gorvak was brought out for its weekly display, Mina pressed her face against the window. The great creature moved slowly around the arena, guided by handlers with long poles. Its yellow eyes scanned the crowd with what looked like hatred, but it obeyed the painful prods that kept it moving. The infected barb in its neck was clearly bothering it more than before. The creature kept tilting its head to one side, trying to relieve the pressure. Dark fluid leaked from the wound, staining its scales. As the display ended and the Gorvak was driven back to its tunnel, Mina made a decision. Tomorrow, when they threw her into the arena for the final feeding, she would not run or scream as the previous victims had done. She would try something that no prisoner had ever attempted. Something so unexpected that even the cruel Vorthak would be shocked. Night fell over the arena complex. In her cell, Mina used the few tools she had managed to hide to work on her restraints. The metal was strong, but she had learned to be patient during her weeks of captivity. Tomorrow would bring either death or the beginning of something the Vorthak Empire had never seen before. A human who refused to be entertainment. A prisoner who chose to fight back in the most unexpected way possible. The sound of excited voices echoed through the complex as Vorthak citizens began arriving for the Festival of Conquest. They were eager to see the special show that had been promised. The feeding of a human to their greatest beast. But Mina was no longer thinking about fear or death. She was thinking about patterns and possibilities, about the intelligence she had seen in the Gorvak's eyes, about the infected wound that caused it constant pain. Most of all, she was thinking about what might happen if someone showed kindness to a creature that had known only cruelty for its entire life. The festival would indeed be memorable, but not in the way the Vorthak expected. The morning of the Festival of Conquest arrived with the sound of thousands of voices filling the arena above. Mina could hear the excitement in the crowd as Vorthak citizens took their seats for the special ceremony. Their harsh voices created a wall of noise that seemed to shake the very stones of her cell. Guards came for her at midday. They were dressed in ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine, and they carried weapons decorated with gold and precious gems. Everything about the day was designed to show the power and glory of the Vorthak Empire. "Time for your great honor, human," the lead guard said with mock respect. "The crowd is eager to see you perform." They removed her regular restraints and replaced them with special ceremonial chains. The metal was lighter but stronger, designed more for display than actual security. They wanted the crowd to see her clearly as she was presented to their champion beast. The walk to the arena took longer than usual. They led her through corridors lined with Vorthak officials and important citizens who had come to watch the ceremony. Up close, their yellow eyes followed her movement, and she could hear them making comments about her appearance and probable behavior in the arena. "So small," one said. "Will she even run or just stand there in fear?" "The beast will be disappointed." Another replied, "Not much meat on those bones." Mina kept her face calm and her eyes forward. Inside, her mind was focused on the plan she had developed during the long night. Everything depended on reaching the Gorvash before the handlers could interfere. They brought her to a preparation chamber beneath the arena floor. Through the ceiling, she could hear Arena Master Turvash addressing the crowd. His voice was amplified by electronic systems so that everyone could hear his words clearly. "Citizens of the great Vorthik Empire," he announced, "today we celebrate another year of conquest and expansion. Our armies have brought order to 12 new worlds. Our fleets control the trade routes of 3-star systems, and our culture spreads fear and respect throughout the galaxy." The crowd cheered loudly. Mina could feel the vibrations through the floor. "But today is special," Turvash continued. "Today we demonstrate why the Vorthek are destined to rule all lesser species. You will witness the feeding of a human female to our greatest beast. This pathetic creature represents everything weak about her species. She is small, soft, and helpless. Watch how quickly she falls before superior Vorthek power." More cheering filled the air. Mina closed her eyes and tried to block out the sound. She needed to stay calm and focused. The chamber door opened and additional guards entered. One carried a long pole with an electric prod at the end. Another held a sonic device used to control arena creatures. They were taking no chances that she might somehow escape or problems. "Remove her clothing," Turvash ordered through a communication device. "The crowd wants to see how weak and vulnerable she is." The guard stripped off her prison uniform, leaving her wearing only basic undergarments. The ceremonial chains remained locked around her wrists and ankles. She felt cold air against her skin and tried not to shiver. "Perfect," Turvash said with satisfaction. "Now she looks properly helpless. Bring her up." A section of the chamber floor began to rise, lifting Mina toward the arena above. As she emerged into the bright lights, the roar of the crowd hit her. Like a physical force, thousands of Vorthik spectators were on their feet, cheering and shouting insults. The arena looked different than it had during regular games. Special decorations hung from the walls, and the sand had been raked into perfect patterns. At the center stood a raised platform where Arena Master Turvash waited with other important officials. "Behold," Turvash announced as Mina was brought before him, "the human female who thought she was clever enough to escape our security. She explored areas forbidden to prisoners. She created tools from scraps of metal. She believed her small intelligence made her special." The crowd laughed and jeered. Some threw small objects at the platform, though the energy barriers prevented anything from actually reaching Mina. "Today she will learn the truth," Turvash said. "No amount of cleverness can save a weak creature from the power of the Vorthek. She will face our greatest champion, the mighty Gorvuk, and her death will prove the superiority of our race." He gestured toward the largest tunnel entrance. Mechanical sounds echoed from within as heavy doors began to open. The crowd fell silent with anticipation. "Release the beast," Turvash commanded. The Gorvuk emerged slowly from the tunnel. In the bright arena lights, it looked even more massive and terrifying than before. Its dark green scales reflected the illumination like armor, and its claws scraped against the stone floor with each step. The infected barb in its neck was clearly visible. Surrounded by swollen and discolored flesh, the great beast stopped in the center of the arena and looked around at the crowd. Its yellow eyes showed no fear, only a deep and burning hatred for everything it saw. Years of torture and abuse had turned it into a perfect killing machine. "Magnificent," Turvash said proudly. 12 feet of pure destruction. "The creature has been starved for 5 days to make it properly hungry. Nothing will remain of the human but scattered pieces." The guards removed Mina's chains and pushed her toward the arena floor. The energy barriers activated around the fighting area, trapping her inside with the massive predator. "Let the final feeding begin," Turvash announced. The crowd erupted in cheers as Mina walked slowly across the sand toward the waiting Gorvek. Every instinct told her to run, to try to find some corner where she might hide for a few extra seconds of life. But she forced herself to move forward with steady steps. The Gorvak turned to face her as she approached. Its massive head tilted slightly, as if confused by her behavior. Previous victims had always run screaming or frozen in terror. This small human was doing neither. When Mina was within 10 feet of the beast, she stopped. The arena fell completely silent. Even Turvash seemed puzzled by her strange behavior. Slowly, carefully, Mina raised her hands to show they were empty. She made no threatening movements, showed no signs of fear or aggression. Instead, she began to speak in a soft, calm voice. "I know you're in pain," she said to the Gorvak. "I can see the wound in your neck. It hurts you every day, doesn't it?" The creature's yellow eyes focused on her with sharp intelligence. Its head tilted further, and a low rumble came from deep in its chest, but it did not attack. "They've hurt you for so long," Mina continued, taking a careful step closer. "Made you fight when you didn't want to. Shocked you with those prods. Kept you locked in darkness." The crowd began to murmur with confusion. This was not what they had expected to see. Some shouted for the human to run or for the beast to attack. But most were simply puzzled by the strange scene. Mina reached into her undergarments and pulled out a small metal tool she had kept hidden. It was the sharp, pointed instrument she had crafted weeks ago in her cell. But instead of using it as a weapon, she held it carefully and approached the Gorvak's injured neck. "Let me help you," she whispered. The massive creature stood perfectly still as Mina reached up toward the infected barb. Her hands were steady despite the danger, guided by her engineer's precision and her genuine desire to relieve the beast's suffering. The arena held its breath as the small human touched the great predator's wound. This was something that had never happened before in the history of the Vorthek games. Something that changed everything. The infected barb came free with a wet, sucking sound that echoed through the silent arena. Dark fluid poured from the wound as Mina carefully extracted the metal fragment that had been embedded in the Gorvak's neck for months. The great beast shuddered with what might have been relief. For a moment, no one moved. The crowd of Vorthek spectators stared in shock at the impossible scene before them. Their greatest champion, the creature that had killed hundreds of prisoners, was allowing a weak human female to touch it without violence. Then the Gorvak did something that sent waves of fear through the arena. It lowered its massive head and gently nuzzled Mina's shoulder, like a giant pet showing affection to its owner. "Impossible," Arena Master Turvash breathed into his microphone. "The beast has been conditioned to kill. It cannot show mercy." But as the words left his mouth, the Gorvak raised its head and looked directly at him. The intelligence in its yellow eyes was no longer hidden. For the first time in its life, the creature was making its own choice about who deserved its loyalty. Mina pressed her hand against the Gorvak's scarred flank and felt the powerful muscles beneath its scales. "You don't have to obey them anymore," she said softly. "You don't have to kill for their entertainment." The great beast turned its attention to the arena walls where Vorthek guards were rushing toward their positions. Electric prods and sonic control devices appeared as the handlers tried to regain command of their champion, but the Gorvak had tasted freedom, and it was not willing to give it up. With a roar that shook the entire arena, the massive creature charged toward the nearest wall. Its claws found purchase on the smooth stone, and it began to climb with surprising speed. The energy barriers that contained normal prisoners were not designed to stop something so large and powerful. "Stop it!" Turvash screamed. "Use the control devices. Bring it down." Guards fired their sonic weapons at the climbing beast, but the sounds that had once caused it pain now seemed to have no effect. The Gorvak had learned to ignore its tormentors. It reached the first level of spectator, seething and smashed through the protective barrier as if it were made of glass. Vorthek citizens screamed and fled as the enraged creature began its revenge on those who had tormented it. For so long, Mina watched from the arena floor as chaos erupted throughout the massive stadium. She had started something that could not Be stopped. But this was only the beginning of her plan. Using the confusion as cover, she ran toward the tunnel entrances where other creatures were kept. The guards had abandoned their posts to deal with the Gorvek, leaving the holding areas UNDEFENDED. The first pen she reached contained 3 Kreks, the 6-legged predators she had watched kill so many prisoners. But these creatures had also been abused and tortured by their Vorthik handlers. When Mina opened their cage, they did not attack her. Instead, they seemed to understand that she represented a chance for freedom. "Go," she told them, pointing toward the arena. "Help your friend." The Kreks bounded through the tunnel and emerged into the fighting area just as Vorthik security forces were trying to surround the Gorvek. But now they faced multiple threats, and their careful formations quickly broke apart. Mina continued through the maze of holding areas, opening every cage and pen she could find. Dozens of creatures that had been enslaved by the Empire suddenly found themselves free to choose their own actions. Most chose violence against their former captors. In one of the larger cells, she found 2 humans she recognized. Wu was a soldier who had been captured during a raid on a military transport. Sol was a pilot whose ship had been shot down while carrying medical supplies to a colony world. "Mina," Wu said in amazement, "how did you escape?" "I didn't escape," she replied as she worked to break their restraints. "I made a friend." The sound of the Gorvak's roar echoed through the corridors, followed by screams and the crash of breaking stone. The great beast was systematically destroying everything it could reach, and its fellow creatures were joining the rampage. "The whole arena is falling apart," Sol observed. "What's your plan for getting out of here?" Mina had been thinking about that question for weeks. The Vorthik have emergency protocols for major disasters. When those protocols activate, certain security doors will open automatically to allow evacuation. She led them toward the arena's control center, where she had observed technicians working during her time as a prisoner. If she could reach the main computer systems, her engineering skills might be able to trigger those emergency procedures. The corridors were filled with running Vorthik guards and officials trying to escape the chaos above. Most were too panicked to notice 3 humans moving against the flow of fleeing aliens. They reached the control center to find it mostly abandoned. A few technicians were still at their posts, trying to regain control of the arena systems. But they were overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. Mina approached the main computer terminal and began studying its alien interface. The symbols was strange, but the basic logic of engineering was universal. Power flowed in predictable patterns, and safety systems followed standard protocols. "Can you really operate that thing?" Wu asked. "Engineering is engineering," Mina replied as her fingers moved across the control surface. "The Vorthik aren't as different from us as they pretend to be." She found the emergency evacuation controls and began activating them one by one. Throughout the arena complex, blast doors opened and security barriers shut down. Escape routes that had been sealed for decades suddenly became available, but more importantly, she accessed the communication systems that connected the arena to the rest of the Vorthik homeworld. "Attention all oppressed peoples," she spoke into the microphone, her voice carrying across the planet's communication networks. "This is Mina, a human prisoner on the Vorthak homeworld. The arena uprising has begun. Your captors are not invincible. They can be defeated." Her words reached thousands of enslaved beings across the planet. In mining facilities, factory complexes, and labor camps, prisoners looked up from their work as hope flickered in their hearts for the first time in years. The image of a small human commanding the Vorthik's greatest beast spread through underground networks faster than the Empire's sensors could stop it. Revolution was a contagious idea, and it was already beginning to spread. Back in the arena, the Gorvak had been joined by dozens of other creatures in its rampage against the Vorthik, but now something even more significant was happening. The beast was actively protecting the human prisoners who had been scheduled for execution. When Vorthik guards tried to recapture escaped humans, the Gorvak would appear to drive them away. It seemed to understand that Mina's people were under its protection. "The uprising is spreading beyond the arena," Sol reported, monitoring the communication channels. There are reports of revolts in 12 different facilities across the planet. Mina smiled as she watched the status displays showing the collapse of Vorthok security across their homeworld. Good. They've made too many enemies. Now those enemies are working together. Through the control room's windows, she could see smoke rising from distant parts of the capital city. The Vorthok Empire was facing its first serious internal challenge in centuries, and it was being led by the creatures they had created for their own entertainment, but Mina knew this was only the beginning. The real fight for freedom would come. When the Empire's military forces arrived to restore order, she looked at her two rescued companions and made a decision. We need to reach the spaceport. If we can capture some ships, we can spread this revolution to other worlds. The Gorvak's roar echoed through the arena one more time, but now it sounded different. It was no longer the cry of a tortured beast. It was the battle roar of a leader calling its followers to victory. The Vorthok Empire had created their own destruction by underestimating the power of compassion, and a young human engineer had shown them that even the smallest act of kindness could change the fate of the galaxy. 6 months after the arena uprising, Mina stood on the bridge of the liberated battleship Freedom's Dawn, watching as the last Vorthok stronghold fell to the combined rebel fleet. Through the view screen, she could see explosions lighting up the surface of the Empire's military headquarters on the fortress world of Keth Prime. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition since that day in the arena when she first touched the Gorvak's wounded neck. What had started as a single act of compassion had grown into the largest liberation movement in recorded history. Final Resistance Pocket has surrendered, reported Commander Wu, who now served as the head of military operations for the Galactic Freedom Alliance. The Vorthok Home Fleet is requesting terms. Mina nodded but kept her attention focused on the tactical display. Even in defeat, the Vorthok were dangerous. Their empire had ruled through fear and cruelty for over 2 centuries, and desperate beings often made unpredictable choices. What are their terms? She asked. Complete surrender of all military assets, Sol replied from the communications station. The former pilot had become their chief negotiator, skilled at finding peaceful solutions to complex problems. They're offering to withdraw to their original homeworld and accept whatever government we establish, and in return, they want guarantees that their civilian population won't be harmed. No revenge killings or mass executions? Mina considered this carefully. The rebels had every reason to seek revenge against their former oppressors. The Vorthok had enslaved entire species, destroyed countless worlds, and killed billions of innocent beings. Many of her allies wanted to see the Empire's leaders pay for their crimes, but that was not the kind of galaxy Mina wanted to build. Accepted. She said, all Vorthok civilians will be protected under the new galactic charter. War crimes will be prosecuted through proper legal channels, not mob violence. A low rumble echoed through the ship, and Mina turned to see Guardian, the Gorvak, entering the bridge. The massive creature had to duck to fit through the reinforced doorway, but it moved with careful grace to avoid damaging the equipment dot in the months since their first meeting. Guardian had become more than just her companion. It had learned to communicate through a combination of gestures, sounds, and a translation device that Mina had designed. More importantly, it had become the symbol of the rebellion's core principle. That understanding could triumph over hatred. Guardian asks about the evacuation ships, Sol translated as the creature made a series of clicking sounds. The refugee camps on Kepler Station are overcrowded. Mina walked over to Guardian and placed her hand on its scaled arm. The gesture, that had once seemed impossibly brave, now felt as natural as breathing. Tell Guardian that 3 more transport ships will arrive tomorrow. No one will be left behind. The refugee crisis had been one of the most challenging aspects of the revolution. As the Vorthok Empire collapsed, millions of beings who had been enslaved or oppressed suddenly found themselves free but homeless. Many of their original worlds had been destroyed or rendered uninhabitable. The Alliance had made it a priority to provide food, shelter, and medical care to all refugees. regardless of their species or former allegiance. It was expensive and logistically complex, but Mina believed it was essential for building lasting peace. Incoming transmission from the Kelani delegation, Wu announced. They're ready to sign the charter. The Galactic Freedom Charter was Mina's greatest achievement, though she would never have claimed credit for it. The document had been written by representatives from 47 different species, working together to establish principles for a new kind of galactic government. Instead of rule by conquest. The charter established equality among all sentient beings. Instead of exploitation, it guaranteed the right of every species to develop according to their own culture and values. Most importantly, it outlawed the use of sentient beings as entertainment or disposable labor. How many signatures do we have now? Mina asked. 31 species have ratified the charter, Sol replied. 8 more have indicated they'll sign within the week. The remaining holdouts are mostly asking for clarification on trade regulations and territorial boundaries. Nina smiled. Those were exactly the kind of problems she wanted to be dealing with. Complex negotiations about economic policy were infinitely preferable to fighting for basic survival. Any word from Earth? She asked. The Colonial Defense Force has officially recognized the Alliance government, Wu reported. They're sending a diplomatic mission to establish formal relations. That news brought mixed emotions for Mina. Earth had been slow to respond to the revolution, partly because the Vorthak had never directly threatened human space. Some politicians had even suggested supporting the Empire in exchange for favorable trade agreements, but public opinion on Earth had shifted dramatically when images of the arena uprising reached human worlds. The sight of a young human woman commanding alien creatures in a fight for freedom had captured the imagination of billions of people. Now, Earth wanted to be part of the new galactic order. Mena was willing to welcome them, but she would not allow human interests to take priority over the principles that had guided the revolution. Set up a meeting with the Earth delegation, she said, but make it clear that they'll have to follow the same charter as everyone else. Guardian made a sound that Mena had learned to recognize as amusement. The creature understood politics better than most diplomats, having observed the behavior of both oppressors and rebels during the long campaign. Guardian says the humans will try to negotiate special privileges, Sol translated with a grin. It suggests we let them meet some of the refugees from the mining colonies. That was exactly what Mina had been thinking. Nothing changed human attitudes faster than hearing first-hand accounts of Vorthak brutality. The delegates from Earth would quickly realize that principles mattered more than profit margins. Excellent idea, she said, patting Guardian's arm. Sometimes the best teacher is experience. The bridge's main display activated, showing a live feed from the capital city of the former Vorthak homeworld. Instead of the oppressive architecture and military parades that had once dominated the streets, Mena could see mixed groups of different species, working together to build new homes and community centers. The transformation was remarkable. In just 6 months, the city had changed from a symbol of tyranny into a model of interspecies cooperation. Former enemies now shared resources and knowledge, united by their common desire for a better future. The memorial is almost finished, Wu observed. Pointing to a large construction project in the center of the city, the memorial to the oppressed was being built on the site of the old arena, where the uprising had begun. Instead of a place for violence and entertainment, it would be a garden where people from all species could come to remember those who had suffered, and to celebrate their freedom. At the center of the memorial would stand a statue showing Mena and Guardian at the moment when everything changed. But the inscription would carry the names of every being who had died fighting for liberation, regardless of their species or role in the revolution. When will it be dedicated? Mena asked. Next month, Sol replied. On the 1st anniversary of the uprising. Representatives from all the charter worlds are planning to attend. Mina felt a mixture of pride and sadness. The memorial was necessary and important, but she knew that the real work of building a better galaxy was far from over. Freedom was just the beginning. Now came the harder task of proving that different species could live together in peace and equality. Guardian has a suggestion for the memorial ceremony, Soul said after listening to more clicking sounds from the creature. It wants to invite some of the other arena survivors to speak. The creatures that fought with us? Mina asked. Guardian nodded its massive head. Many of the bioengineered beasts from the arena had chosen to stay with the rebel forces even after the war ended. They had become valued members of the Alliance, using their unique abilities to help with construction, exploration, and peacekeeping missions. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mina said. Their voices deserve to be heard too. As the ceremony planning continued around her, Mina found herself thinking about the future. The Alliance was strong and growing, but challenges remained. Some species were still suspicious of cooperation. Pirates and warlords operated in the outer systems, and there were always new problems arising as different cultures learned to work together. But for the first time in her life, Mina felt genuinely optimistic about what was possible. The galaxy had learned that compassion was not weakness. That understanding was not naivety, and that even the smallest act of kindness could grow into something that changed everything. Guardian made a soft rumbling sound and gestured toward the view screen where the stars of a dozen different systems were visible in the distance. Each of those lights represented worlds where former slaves were now free, where children could grow up without fear, and where different species were learning to be neighbors instead of enemies. The Vorthic Empire was gone, destroyed not by superior weapons, but by a simple truth that Mina had discovered in the arena. When beings chose compassion over cruelty, cooperation over conquest, they became capable of achieving miracles.